Dorothy Gale and her friends embark on a mission to separate the truth from the legend about Oz's returning goddess, Polychrome, and they're not going to like what they find. We're going to talk about it right here in our review of Oz, Fall of the Emerald City #2 from Zenescope. See you in 3. Welcome back to Comical Opinions. This is our review of Oz, the Fall of the Emerald City #2. This issue is written by David Wohl, art by Iman Casalos, colors by Robbie Bavard, letters by Taylor Esposito, and the main cover, cover A, is drawn by Al Barrionuevo. In the previous issue, issue #1, readers were introduced to Polychrome, a goddess with the supposed power of life and death. She can lay waste to entire armies of small demonic creatures, and she can also raise the dead, not just in zombie format, but true resurrection. Her arrival in Emerald City led to much fanfare and a lot of worshiping because she is a long storied goddess from eons ago, and they believe she's just returned to make everything peaceful and prosperous. But Dorothy Gale and her friends think that something's fishy, something's off. So the timing doesn't work out because Polychrome arrives just at the exact same time a giant water dragon happens to attack Emerald City. And she's got the wizard working on her side, which already says that something's up. Okay, and that brings us into Oz, Fall of the Emerald City, issue #2. Glinda, Nicholas, and Adraste are off at some place called Abraxas Academy, which is sort of this, think of it as Hogwarts for Oz, if you will. They're going through all the books and all the old tomes and scrolls and trying to figure out what they can figure out about Polychrome, and all they can find are stories in children's books, some that even Adraste remembers, but she's always chalked it up to fairy tales. But it turns out that the fairy tales are more fact than fiction, and that the only other thing they can figure out is that after a climactic battle with witches, as the story goes, Polychrome decided to leave Oz and sequester herself in a hidden island called Peakinspire. Meanwhile, Dorothy Gale, the Lion, and the Scarecrow are waiting outside the Council of Emerald City's meeting with Polychrome. And then when the meeting is done, she's incensed to learn that her father, King Lug, and the Council have turned over leadership over to Polychrome because they believe more monster attacks are coming. Polychrome is all powerful, and they're better off with everything peacefully transitioned to Polychrome's control. But Dorothy's not having it, and the wizard, who is snake, a heel, and a jerk overall, reminds her that if she doesn't like it, she can go pound sand. And that's where we transition to where Dorothy heads next. Back at Abraxas Academy, Glinda and her friends are still doing research, and all of a sudden the ground starts shaking, the floor starts rumbling, and a sudden sinkhole opens up. And ancient wizards and witches who had died and were entombed below the academy as a form of just honor, and that's a good place to be, but they were good wizards and witches, have suddenly been reanimated into this zombie form. They come up through the hole and they start attacking Glinda and her friends. A big magical battle occurs. Glinda and Adraste manage to put the wizards and the witches back in their place, but not before one of the wizards managed to gain enough of control to say, I'm not trying to hurt you because I want to. Polychrome is making me do this. And then they seal them back in, and that gives Glinda the confirmation she needs that Polychrome is not who she says she is. Once the fight is done, Dorothy shows up after the confrontation with the wizard outside of her father's council, and they say, look, we got to do something about Polychrome. The only lead that they have is that when Polychrome was defeated the first time, however many eons ago, that she was sequestered into some place called Peakinspire Island. So they get into one of Glinda's magical bubbles and they float out and over to the ocean to where the island's supposed to be located, and they find a crack in the sky, which is some kind of cloaking barrier of some sort. They go through the crack, they find the island, and there's a giant rainbow that lands at the peak of a pyramid that's right at the heart of the island. And they find many dead, what appear to be guards. Some of the guards are still alive. They attack because they don't know if they're on the side of Polychrome or not. Eventually, they figure out that they're both allies, want the same thing, and the guard says, we're supposed to keep her imprisoned, we failed, and now all these people are dead, and the world's in big trouble. Dorothy and her friends head to the pyramid because that's where the guard said that they have to go next. They find a wizard there who's also dying, and he says, look, we tried to stop her, it didn't work, but to stop her truly, you will find the answer that you need on the other side of the rainbow. And so Dorothy and her friends step through a portal that opens up in the rainbow that ends at the pyramid's peak to find out that things are really headed in a bad direction if they don't stop Polychrome very quickly. Okay, let's talk about the technical aspects a little bit. Dorothy is a strong, determined problem solver. She's a woman of action, and David Wohl lays it out 100% in this issue. So there's not a whole lot of character growth, but it is very consistent with Dorothy's character. However, her indignation that her father and the council turned over everything to Polychrome so readily, so easily, may come back to create a dramatic wedge between her and her father. I'm not sure if the story is definitely going to go in that direction, but the seed is planted there. So we'll see if that plays out either in this miniseries or sometime in the future. So we'll keep an eye on that. Moving to the artwork, generally speaking, Iman Casales' art is very good. There's a lot of facial acting, particularly from Dorothy, because she's angry, and then she's outraged, and then she's thoughtful, and then she's suspicious. So you get a whole range of facial acting through there. And then you have this big magical battle, which also looks pretty great. Overall, the character designs, the figure work, the movement, it's all laid out pretty well. That said, there's a minor down point, and the down point is in Robbie Bavard's coloring. The palette selection is good. The overall color choices are visually pleasing. The whole thing pops. It looks, from a color perspective, it looks pretty good. Where it's not really particularly great is in how the colors are applied. There's almost no feathering or contouring or texture, so everything looks pretty flat and glossy at the same time. It's not necessarily bad. We've seen definitely much worse, but everything, all the coloring application looks very hard-edged and sharp, and that doesn't go well along with the contouring of, say, soft skins and textures. So you get this sort of glossy, almost kind of a hard edge, this hard texture look to, especially for characters that should have soft, rounded features. Switching gears to talking about pacing and structure, Wohl could have leaned on a trope in this story, and that trope is to have everyone arguing with Dorothy and pushing back against Dorothy, saying, Polychrome is our savior. She's the one who's going to save all of us. You're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. They're trying to not gaslight her, but make her doubt herself, make her second guessing herself. Wohl doesn't do that here. He says, Dorothy's got a gut reaction to it. We're just going to go along with it. And that helps a long way towards getting the pacing up, because you don't waste a whole lot of time with this frustrating back and forth trying to figure out if Polychrome is good or bad. You pretty much figure out that Polychrome is bad right from the get-go. On the theme and what is the central message here, the set is exactly that, is trusting your instincts. Dorothy trusts her gut. She feels something is off about Polychrome, and then we head right into the action. Rather than not listening to everyone around her and yielding to the pressure of her friends and her family. That serves as a good object lesson about trusting yourself and trusting your instincts, but it's also a great way to elevate Dorothy's character and her hero status. Moving over to the big picture, let's talk about continuity and historical context. So on the continuity front, where does this title fit in within the larger Grimm universe, especially because a lot of what's going on with Grimm is focused on Lovecraft-inspired stories, Lovecraftian horrors? The answer is it doesn't. For all intents and purposes, the realm of Oz is staying separate and out of everything that's going on with the other titles that are dealing with Lovecraft problems, which is good or bad, depending on your point of view. If you want stories that have that Zenescope feel, but are pretty much self-contained and aren't beholden to what's going on in Grimm fairy tales, or maybe a mystery one-shot, then you're in good shape. Regarding the historical context, as far as if you're new to this title and you're wondering how this relates to L. Frank Baum's original classic story, Wizard of Oz, it doesn't, except for the names and the places, and maybe even a little bit of the costume designs, which were clearly inspired by the 1939 film. This is a public domain, open source version of Oz in a more futuristic, kind of a cyberpunk, maybe not cyberpunk, maybe a steampunk type of aesthetic. So it's got the names, it's got the places, but this is really disconnected from anything that has to do with the original source material. Final thoughts. What do we think about Oz Fall the Emerald City #2? It's fast paced, action packed. It's good middle entry in a 3-part story, and the villain is an all powerful goddess, which is a great challenge for the heroes to overcome. Wool's character work, the pacing, the plot, they're all on point, and the art is good to well above average. Therefore, we're going to give this issue an 8 out of 10. What do you think about the series? Want to know your comments? Want to know what you think about Zenescope's version of Oz? Do you like it? Do you like it better than the original source material, or not so much? Want to hear your comments? Otherwise, like, share, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned through the outro for the next review.